The wind carried dust across the dry land of Arizona as the sun sank behind the red cliffs. The cowboy named Luke Carson had spent years riding alone, working from ranch to ranch, fixing fences and helping strangers without asking for much. He had no family left and carried only an old saddle, a worn Bible, and a quiet heart that still hoped for peace. One evening, while crossing near the Apache territory, he saw smoke rising from a distant camp. He knew it was not wise to approach without reason, but he also knew that the Apache people respected honesty more than fear. Luke had once worked with them during cattle drives and had earned a small measure of their trust. When he arrived, he found the Apache leader, Chief Nantan, sitting by a fire surrounded by warriors. The air was heavy with tension. Luke dismounted slowly and lifted his hat in greeting. The chief studied him with cold eyes. "Cowboy," he said, "you come to trade or to trouble?" Luke replied calmly, "Neither, Chief. I came to pay respect. I saw smoke and thought someone might need help." The men around the fire laughed softly. The chief motioned for him to sit. There was silence for a moment, broken only by the crackling wood. Then Nantan spoke again, his voice sharp with pride. "You white men always come with words of help, but your kind brings pain more often than peace." Luke didn't argue. He looked into the fire and said quietly, "Pain don't care about color, Chief. I've seen enough of it from both sides." Something in his voice caught the chief's attention. Maybe it was the honesty, or maybe it was the tired look in Luke's eyes, but Nantan did not reply. Instead, he poured him a cup of strong coffee and said, "Drink, cowboy. You have a good tongue, but words are easy. I have a challenge for you." Luke nodded slowly. "Name it." The chief looked toward one of the tents nearby. A small figure sat inside, almost hidden in the shadow. "Inside is my daughter Tiva," the chief said. "She was born with weak eyes. She cannot see much. And after an accident last spring, she walks with a limp. No man in my tribe wishes to take her hand. They call her broken. You talk about peace and respect, but would you show it to one who is less than perfect?" The other warriors laughed again, thinking their leader was mocking the cowboy. But Luke didn't smile. He felt something tighten in his chest. "Chief," he said slowly, "a heart can be stronger than legs, and eyes ain't needed to see kindness." Nantan's face hardened. "Fine," he said, his tone almost mocking. "Take her. She is yours. A gift from the great Nantan to the wandering cowboy. Let us see how long you keep her before you ride away." Luke's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to anger. He looked toward the tent and said softly, "I'll take care of her, Chief. You have my word." The chief laughed loudly. "Your word means nothing here, cowboy. But take her if you dare." Luke walked to the tent. Inside sat a young woman wrapped in a blanket, her dark hair shining in the firelight. Her eyes were pale and cloudy, staring toward the sound of his footsteps. She didn't speak, but her hands gripped the edge of the blanket nervously. Luke knelt beside her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "my name's Luke Carson. I reckon your father asked me to take you along." Her lips trembled. "You don't have to. I'm just a burden." He smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Maybe I've carried heavier burdens before. I don't mind this one." For a moment, she turned her head slightly toward his voice, as if studying the tone. Then she whispered, "You'll leave like others did. They always leave." Luke took her hand carefully and said, "I don't promise things I don't mean. If I say I'll stay, I'll stay." The next morning, he packed his small wagon with supplies. The chief stood at the edge of the camp, arms crossed, watching in disbelief. "You really mean to take her?" he asked. Luke nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll give her a home." The chief's voice was cold. "Do not bring her back. She is no longer of my people." Luke helped Tiva into the wagon, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and guided the horse away from the camp. As they moved down the rocky trail, Tiva sat quietly, listening to the sounds around her, the creak of the wheels, the rhythm of the horse's hooves, and the distant wind through the canyon. Hours passed before she spoke again. "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. Luke thought for a moment. "Because sometimes people just need someone who believes they're worth something. Maybe that's enough reason." Days turned into weeks. Luke built a small cabin near a stream where tall cottonwoods offered shade. He taught Tiva how to feel her way around safely, marking the paths with smooth stones and hanging small bells near doors so she could find her way. She began to smile a little, even laugh when he made gentle jokes about his poor cooking or his bad singing. One evening, While they sat by the fire outside, Luke was whittling a small wooden bird. Tiva listened to the sound of the knife against the wood. "You're quiet tonight," she said. He nodded. "Just thinking," he replied. "About what?" He smiled at the question. "About how someone can lose everything and still find peace again." Tiva tilted her head. "You talk like someone who's been hurt before." Luke chuckled softly. "Ain't we all? But I guess I'm learning that healing don't always come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from someone who reminds you life's still worth living." Tiva's eyes filled with soft tears. "You shouldn't waste your life on me. I can't see the sky or the stars you talk about. I can't even walk far without falling." Luke placed the little wooden bird in her hands. "Maybe not. But you hear the wind. You feel the world. That's more than most folks do. Don't call yourself broken. You just see different." For the first time, she smiled fully. "You sound like a preacher," she said playfully. He laughed. "Maybe just a cowboy with too much time to think." As weeks passed, she learned to move around more freely. She helped with cooking, listened to the radio when traders passed through, and sang old songs in a voice so sweet that Luke often stopped working just to listen. Her laughter became the heartbeat of that quiet cabin. One morning, a group of ranchers rode by and saw her hanging laundry outside. When they realized she was the daughter of the Apache leader, they were surprised. One of them asked Luke later, "You really live with her?" Luke nodded calmly. "She's my wife now. I gave her my last name." The ranchers exchanged uncertain looks, but none dared mock him. Luke's tone carried quiet strength. He had never spoken of marriage to impress anyone. It was something sacred between him and Tiva. That night, when he told her what he had said, she froze. "You told them I was your wife?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, "because that's what I believe you are. I may not have papers or preachers here, but my word stands." Tiva covered her face with her hands and cried silently. "No one ever wanted me before," she whispered. Luke placed his hand over hers gently. "Then it's about time someone did." Outside, the stars spread across the sky like silver dust. Inside the small cabin, a blind Apache girl who once thought she was unwanted sat beside a cowboy who believed in her worth more than anyone else ever did. Far away in the Apache camp, Chief Nantan heard from traders that the cowboy had not abandoned his daughter, that he had built her a home and called her his wife. For the first time in many years, the proud chief looked toward the distant horizon with quiet confusion. He had mocked the cowboy to prove a point, but it was he who felt humbled now. And somewhere beyond those cliffs, under the same wide sky, Luke and Tiva began to live not as a gift given in mockery, but as two souls who had finally found peace in each other. The first winter in the small cabin was hard, but it brought Luke and Tiva even closer. The nights grew cold and the wind sang through the trees like a lonely tune. Luke spent his days chopping wood and fixing the roof while Tiva stayed inside, cooking and keeping the fire alive. Though she couldn't see the snow falling outside, she could feel the chill in the air and the warmth that filled their home because of him. Every evening, Luke would read to her from an old book of Western tales. His voice was deep and calm, and she loved how he gave life to every word. Sometimes, when he paused, she would finish the sentence from memory. He would laugh softly and say, "You got a better memory than I do." Tiva smiled at his words. "No," she said gently. "I just listen with my heart." In time, she began to move around the cabin as though she could see. She learned every corner, every step, every sound the house made. Luke watched her with quiet pride. One day, when he returned from cutting wood, he found her outside by the stream washing clothes alone. She turned her face toward him when she heard his boots on the gravel path. "You shouldn't be out here by yourself," he said kindly. Tiva laughed. "If I wait for you to help with everything, I'll never learn to live." He smiled and took the wet clothes from her hands. "You're right, but don't make me useless either." She laughed again, and the sound warmed the air more than the sun itself. Their small life became simple but full of meaning. Luke built her a wooden cane so she could walk safely, and he tied a small bell to the horse's saddle so she could hear when he returned from the ranch. He also carved small shapes from wood for her, birds, horses, stars, so she could feel their form with her fingers and imagine their beauty. But not everything was peaceful beyond their cabin. The nearby ranchers often spoke quietly about Luke's choice. Some said he had gone mad to live with an Apache woman. Others thought he was wasting his life. Luke never answered their gossip. He only worked harder and smiled whenever someone asked about her. Months passed and Tiva's health began to improve. Her limp grew lighter and her laughter stronger. She would hum while cooking or tending the small garden Luke built for her. The sound of her songs reached far across the land like music carried by the wind. One evening, a trader came by with mail and supplies. He looked around the cabin and said, "You live good here, Luke. Heard some folks in town talk about you and the Apache girl." Luke looked up calmly. "She's my wife. You can tell them that." The trader nodded with quiet respect. "They say you must have a good heart, Luke. No one else would have done what you did." Luke just smiled. "Maybe she's the one with the good heart. I just followed it." After the trader left, Tiva sat quietly near the fire. "What do they say about me?" she asked softly. Luke walked over, knelt beside her, and took her hands. "Doesn't matter what they say. What matters is what we know. You're my wife, and I'm proud of that." Her eyes, cloudy but gentle, turned toward his voice. "I never thought I would hear someone say that." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep saying it until you believe it." As spring came, Tiva began to grow curious about her father. She often sat by the window listening to the birds and asked questions about him. "Do you think he misses me?" she would ask. Luke sighed. "I think he's proud on the outside but quiet on the inside. Maybe he thinks about you more than he says." One morning she surprised Luke. "I want to go back," she said softly. He froze. "Back to your father?" "Yes," she said. "Not to stay, just to visit. I want him to know I'm alive and happy." Luke thought about it for a while. He knew the journey would not be easy, and the Apache camp might not welcome him again. But when he looked at Tiva's calm face, he saw the same strength that had made him fall in love with her. "All right," he said finally. "If that's what you want, we'll go." They packed food, water, and small gifts, woven cloth, dried fruit, and a wooden carving of an eagle that Luke had made. Then they set out at sunrise. The land was wide and empty, but Tiva could tell where they were by the smell of the earth and the sound of the wind. Luke guided the horse slowly, speaking softly so she would not be afraid. When they reached the Apache village, the people stared in surprise. Some whispered to one another. Others called for the chief. Nantan stepped out of his tent, his face unreadable. Luke dismounted and helped Tiva down. She stood tall, her hand resting lightly on Luke's arm. "Father," she said quietly, "I came to see you." The old chief's eyes softened, though he tried to hide it. "You should not have come," he said sternly. "This is not your home anymore," Tiva smiled gently. "I know, my home is with him, but I wanted you to see that I'm not broken anymore." Nantan looked at her more closely. Her face was glowing, her step steady, her voice calm. For the first time, he saw not weakness but quiet strength. "The cowboy did this?" he asked in disbelief. Tiva nodded. "He taught me to live, to laugh, to be proud again." Luke stepped forward respectfully. "I didn't do much, Chief. She already had that strength. She just needed someone to remind her." There was a long silence. The wind rustled through the tents. Finally, Nantan said, "You have done what I could not. You gave her what no man in my tribe dared give." Luke nodded. A chance to be loved. The chief's lips trembled slightly. "You have her heart now. But know this, cowboy, she will always be my blood. I was wrong to mock you that night." Luke shook his head. "You weren't wrong, Chief. You just didn't know me yet." Nantan turned toward his daughter and said softly, "I am proud of you, Tiva." For a moment, the air seemed to still. Tiva's face lit with emotion and she reached out, touching his arm. "That's all I ever wanted to hear," she whispered. The chief placed his large hand over hers. "You have found a good man. I see that now." They stayed the night in the camp. The Apache people treated them with respect, offering food and songs by the fire. For the first time, Luke and Tiva felt that both worlds, the white man's and the Apache's, had met in peace. The next morning, before they left, Nantan handed Luke a small pouch of turquoise stones. "These belong to her," he said. "Give them to your children one day so they will remember both sides of who they are." Luke accepted the gift with a bowed head. "Thank you, Chief." As they rode away, Tiva leaned against Luke's shoulder and whispered, "I never thought I'd hear him say those words." Luke smiled. "Guess you showed him what real strength looks like." Years passed and their love only grew deeper. They built a larger home, planted trees, and helped travelers who passed by. Sometimes Nantan would visit, sitting quietly by the fire and watching his daughter laugh. He never mocked again. Instead, he often told stories of the cowboy who turned a gift of pity into a bond of love. In the quiet evenings, when the stars filled the sky, Tiva would rest her head on Luke's chest and say, "You changed my world." He would answer softly, "No, Tiva, you changed mine." And though her eyes never healed, she saw more beauty than anyone else around her, the kind of beauty that only love and faith could bring. Luke never forgot the day the Apache chief mocked him. But in the end, it was that day that gave him everything he ever wanted: a home, a family, and a reason to smile again. Their story became a quiet legend told by travelers and ranchers across the valley. A tale of a proud chief, a blind daughter, and a cowboy who proved that kindness can build bridges stronger than pride. And long after they were gone, the wind that passed through the canyons carried their story, softly, gently, as if whispering the truth that love, once given, never truly fades.